Hey y'all, and welcome to PolitiBrawl. My name is Brian, and this Democrat thinks he's got Tucker Carlson on the ropes until Tucker reminds him of the truth about Hillary Clinton.
Your entire party has spent the last year telling us this is the most important thing that has ever happened. We now have evidence that the charges you are making against Trump apply to your own party and your own candidate, and you're ignoring it, and you're throwing this fit on my set telling me, oh, it's not a big deal. Why do you want to talk about the tax bill?
May and July. Obstruction of justice 3 times, violation of Section 1512.
You're not even, you know what? I honestly, it's hard for me to believe, given everything you've said in the last year, that you're putting on this performance now. Why don't you just say, look, what Hillary did, her campaign paying for intelligence from the Russians, that was bad, but she's not president, let's move on. You won't even say that.
I don't know what Hillary did, except she
Actually,
did
we do know.
research.
What do you mean we don't know? We know exactly what she did. They admitted it this week.
They admitted that they paid for opposition research. Every campaign
well, of course they all do.
For opposition research.
That comes from the Russians? This dossier came from the Russians.
No, this dossier came from a research firm and a British individual.
Really? And who is the British individual? Do you know?
I believe his name is Mr. Steele.
Yeah. And why was he hired? Because he was the head of the Russia desk at MI6. He was a Russia expert, and the information was about Trump's ties to Russia. They got this information from the Russians, and they paid, in effect, Russian sources for it.
They paid a man to prepare a memo.
Quick, does it bother you? Does that bother you at all?
Not particularly.
Does it bother you? Has the Podesta Group ever lobbied you for anything?
What do you mean it doesn't bother you? To sit there and tell the audience of millions of people, an audience of mostly Republican viewers, that the Clinton scandals, that getting information likely dripped from the Kremlin itself doesn't bother him, that he is peddling misinformation, because it turns out the Steele dossier was almost a complete fabrication, and it doesn't bother him. That is disturbing, and it's going to get even weirder.
I believe they have. I believe they've also. I believe you're also a friend of Tony.
I'm not a friend of him, and he's never lobbied me. I'm not a sitting member of Congress.
You're not a member of Congress, yes.
And I'm not a friend of Tony Podesta's. But does it bother you that Tony Podesta took money with Paul Manafort from the Russians to carry their water in Washington?
Does it bother you that Paul Manafort was chair of Trump's campaign?
Yes, it does.
Well,
does it bother you that the Podesta firm was working on behalf of the Russians?
I would like to. If it was true, it would bother me.
It is true. I mean,
You're asserting it. A lot of things are asserted on this.
No, I'm not asserting it.
Okay.
It is factually
You're
true
saying that he failed to file a foreign agent's report.
You know, that's I believe that to be true. What I know is true is that they took money from Russian interests to represent those interests here in Washington.
Well,
and I think by your standards, that's wrong.
When you say Russian interests, if you mean private companies, that's different.
No, I mean I mean the Russian government. I mean the Russian government.
If he did it. Why don't you want to talk about impeaching a president? And your answer is, hey, there's this lobbyist in town that isn't any good.
Because the predicate for this impeachment is exactly the same behavior.
You haven't read my articles of
have.
impeachment are only a page and a half, and you haven't bothered to read them.
Actually, I have read them.
Then you know.
And I think they're even more fatuous now than I did before. Now that I know that there's no principle that undergirds them, that you're willing to excuse anything the Democrats do.
Justice is a crime. It is a felony punishable by 20 years, up to 20 years.
Come back when you got a tax bill and you want to chat about it.
Folks, if this man was riding a bicycle, he could backpedal all his way to the top of Capitol Hill. Good grief. This is, I want to make more jokes, but I can't. I can't because this is actually deeply disturbing to me. To have a sitting congressman lecture Americans and on a conservative show, which means mostly Republican viewership, to lecture an audience about the ills of Donald Trump and talking about obstructing justice, which I don't think he did even to this day, to talk about and be so sanctimonious about obstructing justice when Hillary Clinton bought a piece of information, leaked it to the public, and it turns out that piece of information, the Steele dossier, was directly dripped from Russia and was basically a whole lot of nothing. It was a pack of lies. It's really that simple. So to have a sitting congressman tell a bunch of conservatives that you don't need to pay attention to that it's not worth it, it has nothing to do with the president, and therefore doesn't deserve the same level of scrutiny is infuriating to me. If it wasn't for double standards, I know I already said this, but I can't say this enough. If it wasn't for double standards, the Democrats wouldn't have any. It's sad that the mainstream media did not report about this. They didn't. The only one that allowed this guy a proper platform was Tucker, and then he went on Tucker and basically lied to the American people and got away with it. He is still a sitting member of Congress. Meanwhile, they impeached Donald Trump over obstruction of justice, a charge that makes absolutely no sense when the next guy up continued the investigation. This is an upside down world, and I'm really tired of being lied to and talked down to by people like this. There's a reason why Tucker now hosts his own show, so he doesn't have to deal with this sort of crap. Good for him. I'm glad he's doing it. But today, to this day, it's still annoying to know that people like this can lie through their teeth to the American people and get away with it. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed this segment of PolitiBrawl. Catch you on the next one, and until then, y'all have a good one.